Hello and welcome to Argument Basics. In this short video, we'll take a look at the argument from or by example. It is, of course, an argument, which means that it has a single conclusion, and the conclusion is the point you're trying to prove, what you're trying to argue for. And this is supported by premises, the evidence or reasons being offered in support of that conclusion. In the case of an argument by example, as you might guess, the premises are examples. So you provide examples in order to support a conclusion. Now, as you probably suspect, in everyday life, people are pretty informal about this. A person typically wouldn't say example 1, example 2, example 3, conclusion. They would just present their examples. And you might not even realize they're making an argument by example because it's so informal. So, for example, imagine in a workplace, and someone is wondering, would Smith be a good choice for running a project? And someone might say, well, Smith ran, project 1 to success, did a good job. Smith did the second project, did a great job as well. The third project, fourth project, and fifth project, also same thing. So I'm confident Smith would do a good job on this current project. And that'd be an argument by example. The person's probably may not even realize they're doing it, but example 1 would be their success on the first project, example 2, the success on the second project, etc. And the conclusion would be they'd probably have success on this project as well. Now, more formally, if you wanted to be very precise about it, an argument by example would have hopefully multiple premises, at least one, of course, a conclusion, and the formal form would be this. Premise 1 would be example 1 is an example that supports the claim P, whatever you're trying to support. For example, that Smith would do a good job, that Sally has, foreign policy experience, that Ted is reliable, whatever you're talking about. Premise 2 would be a second example that supports that claim, and then premise X, where X is, some number, and to the next example is an example that supports the claim. And then, of course, you conclude that the claim is true. So you're supporting a claim by weight of examples. So how do you tell when you've got a good argument by example? Well, not surprisingly, you look at the examples. So here are the standards of assessment. So first is more examples in general, the stronger the argument. Now, obviously, the arguments for the argument to be strong, the examples have to be relevant. So the more relevant they are, the stronger the argument. So more examples, better. But if someone's just throwing out examples that have no connection, then obviously they wouldn't help that much. So if the question was, does candidate Sally have foreign policy experience? And someone starts talking about, they made a lot of money in business, they run a podcast, they do CrossFit, they have a gym membership as well, and they also really like yogurt. And, these are all examples, but obviously not relevant. They have no connection to the claim. So you'd want examples, more the better, but of course the more relevant, the better. And an example is only an example if it is relevant. And there can be some debate about this. So for example, if we're wondering about, say, foreign policy experience, you may wonder, what would count as that? Or, for example, getting with another political example, if someone's has experience relevant to holding a political office. So suppose someone ran a business. Well, is that relevant to holding political office? Suppose somebody ran a really good marathon. Is that relevant to political office? Suppose someone taught political science for a long time. Is that relevant to holding political office? And so people could debate about the relevance of the examples. But in general, the more the better, and the more relevant, the better. Also important is that the examples need to be specific and clearly identified. So if it's pretty vague, the person, they get a lot of experience. What kind of experience? Oh, lots. This experience, that other experience. And in that case, you'd say, well, what are the particular things? What particular things did they do? And so you'd want the examples to be specific and identified, because you have no way of judging the examples unless you know what they are. Lastly, counterexamples need to be considered. So an example supports the claim, the conclusion, and counterexamples go against it. Now, you might wonder why, when assessing an argument, should I consider things against it? Well, the reason why is when you're assessing arguments, logically, the idea is not, to persuade people and conceal, problems. The idea is to assess it to see if it's good reasoning, to be honest about it. And so properly assessing an argument would require considering defects with it. So are there examples that go against the claim? So for example, if someone claims to be honest, and there are examples of their honesty, you'd also want to consider examples of their dishonesty. If a person claims to be reliable, and they present examples supporting this, you'd always also want to consider examples that go against that, where they were unreliable. Now, judging this can become quite complicated, because as I noted, relevance can be a matter of debate. Say what counts as relevant experience, what counts as honesty or dishonesty, and also weighing the examples and counterexamples. So if someone is, generally truthful, but you found that they have, as all people have, been dishonest about things in the past, how much should they be weighed? Or someone made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. So if a person claims that they're, good at their job or, whatever, and you're weighing, say, their competence against their mistakes, how much should you weigh them? And that's where it gets quite complicated. That involves quite a bit of a judgment call. But in general, more examples, stronger. Relevance, more, stronger. In order to properly assess the examples, they need to be specific and clearly identified, and you should also consider counterexamples. And so that is the argument from or by example. So next, in the future, we'll go on to the argument from authority.